Hi everyone and welcome to Tribe Talk. You're here with Rachel Evans
and Laura Neal.
And today we're going to be talking about reinforcement, breaking it down and also busting some myths.
If you hear the word reinforcement and immediately think sticker charts or bribery, then this podcast is definitely for you. We're going to bust some myths on this one.
Yeah, so in today's episode, we're going to be talking lots about reinforcement, breaking it down and how you can apply that home with your children and your family.
So Rachel, let's start off. What actually is reinforcement? What is the definition?
Yeah, so reinforcement is anything that happens after a behaviour and it strengthens that behaviour. So if a behaviour is reinforced, that means that we're going to see it again in the future. So the frequency might be... it might increase in frequency, it might increase intensity, but if we reinforce a particular behaviour, we're going to strengthen it in the future.
So we're going to see more of it. Yeah.
So we've just defined reinforcement, but that's broken down into two different subcategories. We've got positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement.
Yeah. So positive reinforcement happens when something is added to the environment after a behaviour happens, and that increases the likelihood that that behaviour is going to happen again in the future.
Yeah, and then we have negative reinforcement. Let's just go through that definition first, then we'll unpick it apart. But negative reinforcement is something that's taken away. So after that a behaviour has happened, something is taken away from that environment, and then it increases the future likelihood of that behaviour happening.
Yeah.
But I think the trap that people fall into is that word negative. When they hear negative reinforcement, they automatically think that that's something bad.
Yeah.
And that it's punishment in some way, but that's actually incorrect, because we know that reinforcement increases a behaviour or increases the future likelihood that we're going to see that behaviour again and again in the future. So it's nothing negative, nothing punitive. It's just that something is taken away.
So negative in this respect means minus. You're taking something away. You're minusing it from the environment.
Yes,
yeah.
And I think that's how we learned, isn't it, when we've been learning behavioural science in our training, is to think about reinforcement, especially when it's positive and negative. Just think positive as that plus sign, that addition sign, and then negative, that minus sign. So you're adding something to that environment with positive reinforcement, and then you're taking away with negative reinforcement. Nothing bad about it.
No, because a lot of the time a child might signal you that with behaviour, that they want something removed from the environment. You remove that, and then they continue with that behaviour in the future every time they want that item removed.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important that we start to understand the principle of reinforcement, especially positive and negative reinforcement. They are principles of behaviour. There's no getting away from it. These things are happening. There's changes in the environment, and our behaviour adapts to that. So it's when we're thinking about behaviour in general, but it's more specifically children that have experienced trauma, the population that we work with, when we are looking at behaviour, using these principles of behaviour, picking it apart as to what is actually happening here. Why are these behaviours persisting, or why aren't they decreasing in some way? What is happening in this environment that is that's tricky or strengthening behaviours?
Yeah, and that's the important bit with reinforcement, is behaviour will increase or strengthen, and it can increase, as you said, in frequency or magnitude.
Yeah.
But we're seeing some type of increase with that behaviour to know that reinforcement has happened.
Yeah, and sometimes accidentally, isn't it? And it's not until you start understanding some of these principles of behaviour, and that's what our job is through consultations, that we need to understand where these patterns kind of come from. And it's not until you understand those principles of behaviour you start to pick up on that.
Yeah. Should we do some examples of positive and negative reinforcement?
Yeah, so some just easy examples, I suppose, of positive reinforcement, because I think that's the one that sticks out the most. So a child does well in a test and gets a merit or a dojo point, a sticker on their chart, praise, If that behaviour was to, so if doing well on tests was to continue, then we know that behaviour has been reinforced. Negative reinforcement then, some examples might be a child shouts out in class and then they're sent out. That is negatively reinforcing for that teacher because the child has shouted out. Now they've been removed from that situation.
Yeah, they're being disruptive, the child is leaving, it's negative, and that's what we've got to be mindful of as well. Negative and positive reinforcement is not only happening around the child, it's happening around the adults as well.
Our behaviours get shaped quite easily, and in that example, isn't it, that, you know, when a child is being disruptive in the class and then they're removed, like that just makes the classroom, you know, experience a little bit more manageable for the teacher. So our behaviours are shaped very easily.
Yeah, so the teacher is more likely to send that child out of class in the future because that disruption disappears. You're removing the disruption. So one that always comes to my mind with negative reinforcement is children who might use difficult behaviour when they want something removed. So for our children who've experienced trauma, lots of them have got sensory needs.
Yeah.
So if the environment is too loud or if the lights are too bright, for example, they might start behaving in a way and it's not always directed towards, I need that noise to reduce or I need that light to reduce. They just start behaving in a way. And then if parents, for example, reduce the noise or they dim the lights, they'll do that behaviour in the future because it's resulted in the thing that they want, and those things have been removed from the environment. So we've got to be really careful because behaviour is being shaped all the time, and we really need to be thinking about our responses and how we're shaping behaviour, because children can continue with quite difficult behaviour if we don't teach them alternative ways and we're reinforcing that difficult behaviour.
Yeah. And we see that, you know, when the outcome is more escape and avoidance, when children want to escape an aversive situation or perceive a situation to be aversive, then, you know, this is what indicates that negative reinforcement is likely to be at play because they're trying to avoid or escape that situation. So, you know, more school examples, children that are presented like a maths test, they might engage in behaviour in this example because history has told them that gets removed. If that behaviour continues time and time again, we know that behaviour is negatively reinforced.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I say to parents all the time during consultations. So if you've been dealing with a challenging behaviour for a while and that keeps continuing, you know it's being reinforced in some way. Now, it might be positive reinforcement, it might be negative reinforcement, we don't know at this point. But if it continues in the same situation time and time again and it keeps coming up, that is being reinforced, and we need to look at the environment and say, what's happening here? What is reinforcing this? How is this being reinforced?
And that is one of the key questions we ask in consultations, isn't it? Like, how long has this behaviour been happening? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? Because that's an indication as to, you know, what type of strategy that we really need to implement. Because if it's getting worse, then we are accidentally reinforcing something here. Because we're strengthening behaviour without maybe realising that we're doing that or the family are doing that. So it's important to know the difference, isn't it? And to know that if behaviour is increasing and progressively getting worse over time, then reinforcement is at play. Whilst we're trying to bust some myths as well, Laura, we could talk forever on another podcast about punishment. But when we talk about negative reinforcement, people would automatically go to, well, that's punishment, or that's something that's really bad. We shouldn't use negative reinforcement. But punishment in our language as behaviour analysts is another behavioural principle. It just means that behaviour decreases over time. So that's why it's important to know the difference, isn't it? That if we know that reinforcement is at play because if behaviours increase, but punishment, it just means that behaviours decrease over time and we don't see that behaviour in the future. And often negative reinforcement and punishment are mixed up.
They can be confused sometimes, but negative reinforcement isn't a bad thing. It's something that we might use within an intervention. and can have lots of positive results as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in terms of punishment, Rachel, we could talk all day on that. So let's do another podcast on punishment.
We'll do another podcast on punishment. But
Yeah.
for this podcast, it's just important to know that they are different.
Yeah, completely different. So let's talk about reinforcement and rewards. So quite often when I say the word reinforcement, whoever I'm working with will hear the word reward.
Yeah.
But they're not the same thing. Reinforcement happens every day in our day-to-day lives. Rewards are something that might include reinforcement, but you set them up.
Yeah.
They're set up to support children, and they're definitely not a bad thing. So something that you might hear is that if you use rewards, it's bribery, or children will become reliant on rewards. But actually, if they're used effectively, if they're used looking at what the reinforcement is, and if they're used as reinforcement, actually they can work really well to support particularly children who've experienced trauma to make different choices and to change the way that they're presenting and to really support them to understand how to interact in the world.
Yeah. You were talking then and a couple of different things just popped into my mind, but I think we fall into the trap as professionals when we use in terms such as reinforcement. We just know that we've got to use lay language.
Yeah.
So rewards is something that, a term that we use to describe reinforcement, but absolutely, that's just another term that, especially in our field of work, that rewards is used quite a lot, and then it has like a completely different meaning then. But absolutely, reinforcement is, like you said, it happens every day. Behaviours are reinforced. We're products of our own environment. Our behaviours get shaped through reinforcement, but through other behavioural principles. And yeah, we're trying to bust those myths around, rewards aren't like a bad thing or something that you shouldn't give to a child. Or other feedback that I've had as well is that, well, it's not fair. Why does that child get this reward and this other child doesn't? Especially in classroom settings, they feel like a child that is struggling with their behaviour is getting more than the other children in the classroom. But it doesn't need to be like that, and it's not like that. It's just that we have to sometimes contrive these situations to support a child's learning and support behaviour change, and reinforcement is that thing.
And it's quite interesting because very often children need individualised plans. Now, if you say the word individualised plan, it's set up specifically for that child, then I think everybody would be in agreement that, yeah, that's great if we can provide individualised plans for children and that can be moulded to their needs. But that can include rewards as well, because rewards, as long as you're using the principles of reinforcement, and that's the key, isn't it? Because if you're giving rewards, but you don't see any increase in behaviour in the future, then actually that's not reinforcement, and the reward is not doing the job that it should be doing. So you've got to use your principles of reinforcement. But you might have a child, for example, who really struggles to stay in class. So you set systematic goals where you're increasing the amount of time that they're able to stay in class, and you use reinforcement as a way of saying to them, you've done really well, let's do this again in the future. So you might pair that, you might use a reward to provide that reinforcement, increasing systematically their ability to stay in class. But you're doing lots of things as well as doing that. You're increasing their confidence, you're increasing their knowledge that, yes, I can do this. And often building up their skills at the same time to be able to sit and settle and concentrate. And so there's lots of ways that you can use rewards and reinforcement together to support children in lots of contexts, but school is always one that comes up as one that immediately comes to mind.
Because I think one thing that gets, I suppose, parents and carers really confused is this notion of like sticker charts. Yeah. Because they're so commercialised. You can buy them, on social media, someone's promoting some sort of sticker chart. And I know that from the work that I've done with party training. It's one of the go-to things, and sometimes parents and carers think, oh, I've got my reward chart now, it's going to change everything. But it goes back to what you're saying in that, like, the principles of reinforcement need to be embedded within that. Sticker charts absolutely have got an evidence base of, or token economies as we know them, have an evidence base of effectiveness, but it's how you're implementing that. And that's with any intervention that we prescribe, isn't it?
And if you just have a sticker chart and you're not being mindful of the principles of reinforcement, that sticker chart isn't going to do anything at all. No. And I think this, particularly in the trauma-informed care field, because there's lots of talk of you should never use sticker charts. It won't work for children who've experienced trauma. They only don't work for children who've experienced trauma if you're not being mindful of the principles of reinforcement. Yeah. If you're building in reinforcement and you're really considerate of what is it that the child needs? What are we trying to develop here? What is it that they need? What are they going to find reinforcing? How immediately do they need this reward after they've engaged in whatever it is? What's the magnitude of the reward? If you're considering all of those things, then it will work.
Yeah, you're setting that for success. But if you've got this sticker chart and a child has been engaging in positive behaviour for the entire week, but then they can't cash in till a Sunday until they get that reward, there's so much of a delay, between that positive behaviour and that reward. You're not going to make the link. The child's not going to make that link.
For children who have difficulty in waiting, children who have difficulty with impulse control, that's never going to work for them.
No.
And that's a whole other podcast on those, specifically token economies or sticker charts, as they're more readily known.
Yeah, I think that's something that most of our team are really passionate about, because like reinforcement and those principles are like our bread and butter.
Yeah.
And we spend lots of our time in consultations when we set up interventions like this to really show parents and carers that these are effective strategies. Don't throw them out. They are effective. We just need to implement them in the right way to increase their effectiveness. So I think we run the risk sometimes, or families run the risk of throwing something out. That's really good, but you just tweak your practice and embed some of what you just said, Laura, and you've got something that's great.
It's knowing the science, and that's the thing. It's back to that evidence-based practice, science-based practice. If that is what you're implementing all of the time, then you will start to see the results and start to see it working.
Yeah, because another thing that also comes up is reinforcement is bribery. And that was not.
No.
That is absolutely not. Reinforcement is something different, and it creates behaviour change. Bribery does not. It's ineffective, and they're not the same. So terms such as bribery, or you're dangling the carrot, as ways to kind of put you off the scent, or put you off like, oh, I shouldn't be using reinforcement then, because it's like it's bad, or they're inaccurate.
Yeah, and I think it's having that knowledge that reinforcement is going to happen anyway. It's happening throughout our lives, whether you're an adult or a child. Every single day there's contingencies of reinforcement happening. What we want to do as parents when we're parenting, specifically when we're parenting children who've experienced trauma, who might have more difficulties, we want to harness the power of being able to use that in a way that's going to support our children. Yeah. And it's so powerful. I think reinforcement, if someone was to say, you can only pick a couple of tools, reinforcement would be one that I would pick every single time. There is so much that you can do with it to get engagement, to teach skills, to support children. Even if we're thinking of emotional well-being and mental health, you can use reinforcement to improve emotional well-being and mental health by reinforcing those activities that actually improve mental health on a day-to-day basis. And then increasing them. There's so much you can do with it, but it's understanding the science is so important.
And I think, after this podcast, if you're listening to this now and you're hearing us talking about reinforcement, you just sit back, just in your house, just sit on the sofa and just watch things play out and see where reinforcement's at play. Also see when you can use it to your advantage with partners. We won't get onto that. We won't cover that in the podcast. But
I could do a podcast on that.
Yeah. But you're using it. It's subconsciously, like unconsciously, you're using it to to bring about behaviour change, because like you said, it happens all of the time.
Yeah.
We use lots of reinforcement principles here, just in the workplace, and again, that's another area of practice, an area of research where workplaces are adopting these reinforcement-based systems to support staff, not just productivity, but also well-being.
It's well-being as well. You know, if you think of, we actually have a reinforcement system here where staff get acknowledged if they do something really well, almost immediately on doing that thing. And your emotional well-being increases when you get that immediate feedback of, oh, I've done a really good job there, even if it's just a little task. It's like, oh, I've done a good job, and you feel better. So there's so much that it can do. And something, to be mindful of, and reviewing strategies, I suppose, that you've got at home at the moment, and see where you can embed those reinforcement strategies, because lots of our staff, isn't it, feedback, it's not about that item or that thing that I get at the end when I trade my points in. It's that email that I get that I've done a good job, or you've received points for supporting a team member, or you've received points. It's that makes people feel good. And we can get our children to that point where they're feeling that intrinsic motivation, but using those external ways of motivating for our children, that is just a starting point. So I think this is probably a good place to mention our tribe training, because we're talking about reinforcement here, but we are really giving a brief overview. And if you really want to start embedding it and using it in your home, within our tribe training program, we have 2 weeks we call them behaviour weeks, don't we? So it's 4 hours in total of training on how to use it's how to use a number of behavioural principles, but one of those principles that you cover in the training, Rachel, is how to use reinforcement effectively, and how to spot when you're reinforcing things that you maybe don't want to reinforce in your home as well.
That's easily done. So easily done. Just conversations I'm recalling from last week, just having those questions like, oh, what's happening in this environment now? Is something being accidentally reinforced? Because that is quite likely. It's easy, especially when you're in situations where emotions running high, like you're invested in that, and it's not until you take more of an objective view you can kind of see what's going on. But we cover that. We cover that in a lot more detail in Tribe to help families pick apart what's working for them, and some tweaks to make, and some interventions to take forward.
So if you want to find out more about Tribe and the training offered, you can go to tribecare.org, and it's all the information's on the website there about the different modules and the behaviour modules that are there. Okay,
so we've talked about reinforcement. We've defined it. We've defined positive and negative reinforcement. What could be going on at home, in homes as well. But should we talk about how we should be applying it?
Yes.
Do you want to start?
Sure.
Sorry.
I think there's so many different ways that you could start thinking about applying reinforcement at home. We've already covered where, very, very briefly, I know, but where you might be reinforcing things that maybe you don't want to be reinforcing. But moving on to, if you've got a child who you want to teach a skill, so they can't do something at the moment, or they don't do something, and you want to develop that. It might be something as simple as getting out of bed in the morning, sitting at the table to have breakfast. It might be getting their shoes on for school. Something really simple, just thinking about the morning routine there. For our teenagers, showering. You can start using reinforcement to think about, and the question that always comes up is, what's in it for them? How are they being reinforced by doing these things or by this activity? So showering is a good one, because we could say, oh, our teens will be reinforced for showering because they'll be clean. They don't care about being clean. No. They're really not bothered at all. So if we were going to think about how do we start using reinforcement with our teenagers who maybe don't want to shower, we need to think outside the box. And previously, Rachel, you mentioned about artificial reinforcement and natural reinforcement. I think that's a good example of the natural reinforcement of being clean that might be reinforcing to me or to you, might not be reinforcing to our teens. So then we have to implement artificial reinforcement to get the ball rolling and set that up so that natural reinforcement takes over in the future.
Yes, because we can set that up.
So you can set that up. And this is like this is why I love reinforcement. It's so powerful, because anything like any problem like that comes up, you can start thinking about, well, how can we use reinforcement to support this situation?
Yeah. And anything like you've spoken about like skill building there, and that is the place that we would start, isn't it? So we talk about reinforcement, and in the beginning we said reinforcement increases behaviour, punishment decreases behaviour. So the question is, well, why do we do reinforcement then? We don't want to increase challenging behaviour. No, we want to increase more appropriate behaviours, and we do that, like you said, through skill building. And see those behaviours or those more appropriate behaviours that we want to see more of. And the more that we can reinforce those behaviours, we see them more in the future. And as a side effect, we can see those other behaviours such as non-compliance or shouting or swearing. We see them decrease. Slowly but surely, but and it is, it takes a little bit of time, but that is the power of reinforcement. We don't even have to get into it with the negative behaviours almost, because we're focusing so much on the positive and seeing more of what we want to see more of, but that's a good point. Is skill building is definitely the approach that we take when it comes to reinforcement. And it's important that we make that individualised for that child. So we've spoken about another podcast, haven't we? But if we had two children with us now, or just take me and you, we would be reinforcing very different things. Reinforcement is individualised. So what might be reinforcing for one a person might not be for another, and we need to find that out. And this is why interventions and strategies are individualised, because we need to make sure that we're getting the reinforcement right and we're setting that intervention up to be successful for that child or young person.
So to give an example, if we wanted to build a skill of showering, because so you have a teen, I'm sure many parents will relate to this, you have a teen, they never want to go in the shower, you're battling with them to shower, and you might get them to do it once a week, once a fortnight, but
Dread asking the question.
It's a continuous battle. So how might we use reinforcement in that situation? So what we know from the situation is that showering isn't reinforcing for them. So the being clean isn't reinforcing, because if it was, they would naturally be coming into contact with that contingency, and that would have increased their showering behaviour. So we might need to use artificial reinforcement within these circumstances. So first off, we need to think about, well, what is reinforcing for this teenager? What are they going to, if we said, if you shower twice a week, then you could use like a sticker chart system. You'll get these things on your chart, and then you can trade them in at the end of the week. Or is it going to need to be something immediate? What will actually be reinforcing for them, so they'll invest in this? So first off is asking those questions, and it comes back to how you said it needs to be so individualised. So you make it really individualised, you find out what's reinforcing for them, and if they start to shower and you put a realistic goal of twice a week in, you don't go in with every morning you have to shower, twice a week, realistic, and after you've showered, you can have this artificially reinforcing thing. So it could be a special TV programme, it could be a meal, it could be that they earn points to trade in. It depends what's going to be reinforcing for them. So because that thing is reinforcing, they invest and they start showering. What we also want to do then is support natural reinforcement to take over. So we want, so if it's in a household, we want everyone to be saying, oh, you look so lovely today, or you smell really nice.
That's really nice.
If that's reinforcing to them. Now, we might need to build that up, because for some of our young people, they won't want to hear that, and that won't be reinforcing. But we want to find what's going to be naturally reinforcing, so the natural reinforcement of showering takes over.
Yeah.
And over time, that natural reinforcement will then take over, so you can fade out the artificial reinforcement.
Yeah.
But we teach so many skills in that way and have huge success with it, because reinforcement is a very powerful tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah. That's a really good example, Laura, and especially with teenagers and showering, like that's one that comes up quite a lot. Or just defiance in general into any type of personal hygiene. And with teenagers, when you start talking about artificial reinforcement, there's so many other competing reinforcers, activities that we have to contend with. So there's social media, there's Xbox, there's God knows whatever else that I'm just not up on. But there's lots of other things that are competing with showering. Why should a teenager shower when they can stay on their Xbox and talk to their friends and play FIFA or whatever? We have to, when you're setting up an intervention like that, you have to consider all of those parts. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good example that you gave as well then, because if a teenager is finding their Xbox so reinforcing that that's what they want to do, you make the Xbox contingent on showering.
Yeah.
So if you want more time on the Xbox, if you shower, you can have more time on the Xbox, because that's what's reinforcing for them. There's so many things that you can do. It's very, very powerful. And if parents could understand more of the science and be able to harness that, it would work for them in so many ways.
Yeah. Another point I wanted to make as well, Laura, was when you start using reinforcement, I feel like the whole family or home dynamics just begin to change. So if you're in a household where you find yourself saying, stop doing that. No, don't. Why are you doing that again? And you're living in a world where you're saying lots of reprimands, and you feel like you have to tell them off or correct their behaviours. When you shift to more reinforcement, it becomes a lot more positive, because you're saying, oh, that's a really good job, like thank you for helping me, that's really helped me out, or that was really kind, or you smell so nice, you just had a nice shower, like that's really good. When you start noticing some of those positive behaviours as a family, the family dynamics just changes.
I use a lot of that with my teenagers. And I've got to stop myself as a parent sometimes from reprimanding and think, okay, I'm going to let this one go.
Bite my tongue.
And the next time they do something good, I'm going to focus on that. And we generally have a positive household from that. Not all the time, but
there's bumps in the road. But it's like the general vibe, isn't it, of the home? Like, I speak to parents and carers, and they're like, Rach, I get myself down because I feel like I'm negative all the time, and you don't want to be like that as a parent, do you? You don't want to be focusing on the negatives.
And it cycles. I mean, I can definitely say that with a little bit of a difficult teen at times that I'm working with at home. It can cycle. So if you get into that negative cycle, it can keep going and just get worse and worse. And as the adult, we've got to pull ourselves out of it and take a step back and say, okay, I'm not getting into this.
No, and you just want to have, like, it's not sunshine and roses all of the time. There's bumps in the road, but just generally you want to reset, and this is an easy way for parents to be like, right, take a deep breath, let's reset, let's just try focusing on some of the positives and strengthen them, increase them over time, and you generally feel better about your parenting as well. And
your relationship gets better with your children, most certainly. If you're focusing on that reinforcement, how do I reinforce those positive things that we're doing or I'm seeing, then your relationship does improve then with your children, most certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So we've got a question from a carer that was on one of our recent tribe trainings, which I think is a good question that lots of parents have. So her question was, If a behaviour has been reinforced for a really long time, is it possible to change that? So is it possible to change that behaviour if that reinforcement has been happening for maybe years? So the example that was given was a child who hits out anytime they want something. So if they have a history of hitting out because they want something and then they're given that thing, is it possible to change that hitting if that might have happened for 2, 3, 4 years?
Yes. But I will caveat that with it will take time. So yeah, reinforcement is at play for that behaviour. Child hits out, and what do they get? Sorry, did you say?
It depends on the situation. Like in that for that particular question, it depended on the situation. So could be that they want chocolate in the shop, so they hit out, and then they're getting the chocolate. But it could be anything. They want a toy off another child, and that toy is then given to them.
So it's like translating into the context. So like hitting has resulted in I get something.
They get something. So that's turned into the way that they communicate a lot of the time, which I have to say we do see a lot from our children who, particularly when they first enter stable care arrangements, you might see lots of that. Yeah. So is that possible to
absolutely.
change?
But it will take time, and it goes back to learning history, doesn't it? Like how long has a behaviour been present for? And I use this to reassure parents and carers that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So if a behaviour has been happening for a long time, then expect it to take a little bit of time. So don't throw out that intervention that you've been working at, that's slowly chipping away at this behaviour. Keep that in play. Talk to your consultant about is there anything else I can do to make sure it's most effective. But it's all about that intervention that we implement, monitoring that progress for that young person. They're hitting, they're getting something out of that. They're hitting, they're getting something out of that. We're breaking that cycle and teaching them other behaviours within that, more appropriate behaviours, how to communicate to carers, to their peers, to get that same response, that same interaction from somebody else, but they no longer need to hit them. So that is absolutely something that we can work on and something that we can make progress towards. But it just takes a little bit of time.
And I would say that's where it becomes a multi-level intervention as well, because you might be, you would be using reinforcement in those circumstances, often implementing that artificial reinforcement, but often you've got to do other forms of skill building as well. So teaching a child, it might be teaching a child how to communicate. It might be that you're teaching them how to self-regulate. There's multiple layers to that. But most certainly possible. Well, absolutely, we do it all the time.
It is possible. It just takes a little bit of time, and it depends on that learning history and what we need to do then to support that child. But it's something that we deal with every day.
So that's it for our reinforcement podcast today. Our key takeaway is reinforcement is a hugely powerful tool when you're parenting, and if you can understand the science behind it, you can really use it to support your child in so many different ways, whether it's skill building, whether it's helping them to communicate, helping them with emotional regulation, helping them with friendships. There's so much that you can do with it, and you can use it as part of other interventions as well. So we would always recommend learning about reinforcement and most certainly the science behind it.
So thank you for joining us for this podcast this week. If you want more information about trauma-informed care, then subscribe to Tribe Talk.